The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Beloved, greetings to you. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. It is indeed a joy for me to welcome you today as we come together and continue our series that we started about 4 weeks ago. We're going back and forth between, two series, around what's happening in the United States right now as it relates to the infrastructure of democracy. And then we also are being very, very transnational as we connect with what's happening in the land of my birth, South Africa, given, the pandemic, that this third wave that's been very, very devastating and deadly to so many. And also, to talk about the challenges, economically, socially, politically, especially around the root causes of the recent uprisings, violence, looting, and just kind of bring some perspective to that. And to do so, it's always important for me, to connect with folk who are the closest to these challenges so that they can provide us with a perspective from the bottom up. I do believe that proximity is power. And so those who are in close proximity to the challenge that we are dealing with, we ought to listen to them, with open hearts, open minds and open hands as they share with us how what is happening, how they are experiencing it, how what is happening is impacting and influencing, where they are. Today is certainly no different, so our time together is, of course, in commemoration of Women's Day, Women's Month in South Africa. And we wanted to see how we can create a space and platform, for women to bring some perspective to what we are going through in South Africa. Now, this is very, very important, for a variety of reasons. One, because, whether in the United States or in South Africa or anywhere in the world, the mess that we are in right now is caused by men in power. And so one just have to realize that. And so this morning, we're going to go to school and just receive, what, these women thought leaders will be sharing from what they are doing, where they are, how they see things, and also what are the important questions we ought to be asking right now. I know people, everybody, think they have the answer, but, I've been taught that, life is more about the questions that you're asking rather than the answers that you're giving. So we're going to get into that. And so this is part of our series entitled Renewal, Resistance, and Reimagination in South Africa, Igniting the Embers of Ubuntu. And so we want to see how we can really, get into the humanity of who we are, our mutuality, our dignity together as we navigate our way through what's been happening. Of course, we've heard a lot of speeches and thoughts from our elected officials, in South Africa. While that has its place, reshuffling of cabinets. In fact, I was talking with a colleague this week, and I, said that, I hope that, what we heard, from President Ramaphosa this past week is not, reshuffling, the furniture on the deck of the Titanic. I certainly don't believe that. I don't want to believe that because I believe deeply in the fact that as South Africans, we can resolve what's going on. We can come together, but we have to understand that we're going to have to answer some difficult questions and make some difficult and bold decisions, especially structurally in terms of what needs to happen. So we will dig into that, around it. So we have with us today some grassroots and national thought women leaders to examine the current social, economic, and political crisis in South Africa and explore immediate and long-term systemic solutions to recover, reset, and rebuild a more just, equal, inclusive, and equitable South Africa. That's where we want to go to. That's where we're heading. So we're not looking for, easy fixes. We're not looking for quick fixes. We understand that there is an immediate need for relief and recovery, but we did not get to where we are overnight, and we're clear we're not going to get from where we are overnight. So we got to dig in, we got to go deep, and we have to see how it is that we can get there. So I'm just so appreciative, for my dear sisters, who have joined us today, and looking forward very much to their perspective and the work that they are all doing. They come from various sectors. They will be speaking from those particular sectors, but also, just to share, from their experience as they've connected with colleagues, with family, with friends, with their organizations, throughout the country. I'm glad to welcome from Pretoria my sister and colleague, Reverend Simisila Ngomani. She's the minister at the Willows Methodist Church in Pretoria, and so she will share with us. And then also to have Cynthia Jacobs. She's the founder of Idwala Business Enterprises and Vuka Ume Foundation, very, very involved in youth development, a passion and a vision for that. And so we're looking forward to hear from Cynthia. Full disclosure, Cynthia is my oldest niece. So always glad to have her on, and I've always appreciated the work that she's been doing, in various communities in both, South Joburg, but also around the country, and so appreciate that. And then also my senior fellow, Busi Dlamini, who is a dialogue practitioner in social justice and transformation, that's here with us, senior fellow in racial equity with the Atlantic Institute, and also do a lot of work with the Kettering. She's a fellow with the Kettering, Institute in Dayton, Ohio, and appreciate the transnational work that she has been doing. She's been in it, and looking forward to hearing from her. And then my sister, straight out of Durban, Diane Wurtzog. She is the mayor-elect, in eThekwini, which is the Durban area, and so looking forward to hearing from her. I've been in touch with her, sending prayers and encouragement, because we know, what's been happening in KwaZulu Natal in general, but particularly in Durban and in certain communities. And so, I'm so glad that she's taking some time to come and be with us, to share together, to reflect, and to be with us. I want to invite Cynthia to kick us off. She is probably the youngest, and I don't use that in a disrespectful way, because we know, when you say to folk, you are my younger this or my baby that, folk always would get offended. So I'm not doing it for that purpose, but simply just to see, if she can, kind of, kick us off. She has two beautiful boys, and just love and appreciate her family. So Cynthia, how are you and your family doing, and how is your community doing at this time? Welcome.
Good evening, Pastor. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor to be here and to join you in this chat. So my family and I, we are doing great. We are fine amidst everything that's happening in the country or had happened.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing very well. Cannot complain. Even our community, amidst everything, I must say that we've been kept. We are doing awesome. There are a lot on the ground was done in order to keep the community and families safe. So we are doing well. And maybe just to mention on what you said about being the youngest, it's always an honor for me being the youngest because I've always been the youngest in everything that I've done. So I do not, or I'm not offended by it. Thank you.
Good, good. I appreciate that. You're gonna hold on to the youngest as long as you can. It sounds like it, and that's fine by me. That's good. Now you are in the Klipspruit West, Klip Town, El Dorado Park, area, right? Or as we say when we were growing up, by Vagaspora.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
the area that you are at, adjacent to, of course, Soweto, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was born and raised, and so she and her parents are right around there, and so so great to hear that. Let me go over to Reverend Simi Sile. We call her Reverend Simi. Jumping over to Pretoria. Simi, Reverend, can you tell us how are you, your family, and your community doing?
Good evening, everyone, and good morning to you, Pastor Sauls. Myself and the two boys and my hubby, we're doing very well. Thanks God to that and for that. And my community, it's just fairly there. We're still being hit by the looting. And obviously, with the COVID, that is really not looking as if it's going to disappear anytime soon. But by God's grace, we're still here alive and kicking. With the family, we just went to the Free State where we had a funeral for our uncle, but it wasn't a COVID case. It was a prostate cancer that he carried for some years. But besides that, everybody else is well. The churches, we were supposed to open today, but because we've got a high number of congregants, we're not going to open until the president at least says it must be 50% of people that can come. But while the number is 50, it's not going to do justice to other members that won't be able to come and reach out. At the moment, we're still feeding the souls with the devotional messages online, as well as the services that take place on every Sunday. That's how far we are at the moment. Thank you, Pastor Saul.
Wonderful, and glad to see how you continuing to be the church and to be in worship, utilizing the technology that's available to you, because I know that's been a huge challenge in South Africa. With people really looking for ways to open the churches. And
Yes.
I've always struggled with that term "open the church" because I am one who believes that the church can never be closed, right? Because we just need to be innovative and creative to see how we can be in ministry together. Really, we may not be able to gather for worship, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to be in ministry together, especially during this time when so many are in need. So really
Yes.
appreciate all of the leadership that's going on with leaders, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of
Yes.
just what's the prophetic, a word that South Africa needs right now, as we navigating our way through this. So looking forward to getting to that. I want to bring in
Yes.
Busi. I so appreciate you. I know you're busy with a lot, that you are doing as a practitioner, around convening folk to go deep, in strategic dialogue, around, issues of social justice and racial equity. Busi, how are you doing, your family and your community?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the invite, and just really excited to be in conversation with what seems like an amazing cohort of women in South Africa. I'm doing well. I'm also just very aware of the kind of the blessing of parents being well. So both my parents have been healthy and safe. My brother and his wife as well. I think this period has just highlighted the kind of at the basic core of what we all want is a sense of belonging, a sense of safety. So to have that, feels really like a blessing. And also holding a sense of, with everything that's happening, loss and pain, how do you hold on to gratitude for the things that you do have? In ways that still honor what's happening around us. So I think that's what's very present for me. But other than that, I'm well, and for the most part, really kind of excited for the work that I'm still able to do in the midst of everything that's happening. But
Yeah.
excited for today's conversation.
Great. Thanks, Busi. Appreciate that. I want to make sure that Diana has joined us. Diana is here. Thank you. That's great. Diana, my sister, how are you, your family? And how are things going, in your community? Would you just kind of give us an update on you, family, and community? Okay. So, Diane, you may have to unmute if you haven't unmuted yet. Hmm. Okay. So we'll get back to Diane. Let me go back to.
I found it. I
Oh, there
found
we
the
are.
magic.
She found
Found the
the
magic
unmute
button.
button. Okay. Now I know it's never easy to mute you, so I was a little concerned there. So.
Hi, everybody. I must say, my family's all well. We haven't had any um, major issues. Unfortunately, many people in the community have been affected by COVID. So it's on a daily basis, and every day we just pray to God that we don't hear the next one and the next one, and we pray for healing for those that have contacted COVID. And given the situation that we had in Durban with the riots, we've come to a space where um, we're expecting the numbers to go up because of there was no uh, distancing or sanitizing and all that craziness that happened. But other than that, we are all well. The city itself, I want to say, has major challenges. Right now, we're looking at something like almost 48 billion rand in damages. But then we then take the small business sector, and that is the SMMEs, who are the women that sell the groceries on the road, who sell the fruit, who sell the sweets, who sell the chickens. The estimated damage to those people ranges in the region of 48 million. So it's a very, very, very big loss in the city. And we are trying every day
Mm.
to build. Every day, some store opens again, and we say, "Thank you, Lord." Some person is able to get some sort of funding. Somebody sponsors them, and we say, "Thank you, God, for that as well." So whilst we are in challenging times, we see what God has done in uniting people. He
Mm-hmm.
has united them like you cannot believe. The open arms tell you the unity of a person's soul, and that is one of the most important things. Thank you, Pastor Saul.
Yes. Thanks so much. Let me go back to Cynthia. And Cynthia, if you would, based on the work that you are doing, the fact that we are, commemorating and uplifting women, in your opinion, how has the pandemic, COVID-19, as well as, the socioeconomic and political, instability that was created. I would probably say, in a very, very visible way, because, I mean, a lot of us knew about those undercurrents. We were aware of those undercurrents. How what is the impact on women, you know, um, based on what's just going on right now? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yes, I must say, in the work that I am, or rather more the community that I find myself in, when it comes to the pandemic, it has hit us hard. It has hit us hard in terms of those who used to be our mentors, those who used to speak into our lives, where we've experienced major losses in that, because many of those who are strong and has built businesses are busy falling away, and they are dying due to COVID, and it's all COVID related matters. So, so I think in terms of that, we've been hit hard. But the one thing that I must say that has also come from COVID, despite the losses that we are seeing many women arising, many women taking up the baton, and they are starting their own little side businesses, or as they would call it, side hustles. Especially those who have lost their jobs, they have become creative, and they have reinvented themselves. It's not easy. It is not the financial income that they'd be used to. If it was, when it was before COVID, you had a certain bracket that you of income. Now, obviously, it's lower because you have to start your own side hustle in order to get going. So I think in terms of women rising up, you see a lot of them rising up and starting their own little hustle. They are picking themselves up, because I think as women we understand that we cannot sit and wait for things to happen. We need to make it happen, or otherwise our children will suffer, our families will suffer, because um, I think we just have it in us just to reinvent ourselves. And in saying this, I want to emphasize that it is not easy, it is difficult, but it's a must. It's something that needs to happen. So, yes, so I think that is where we find ourselves, and in the community that I find myself where, and a lot of the ladies are doing their businesses online. So we have community business WhatsApp chats, and that is where I see them advertising their businesses. Just also to mention, I connected with an Indian lady when I went to pick up some products from her the other day. She's like, you know what? It's really not easy. She worked for the Edcon group and she was retrenched. I know Edcon took a hard knock when COVID. They had a hard knock before COVID. They were down and out. And now in COVID, it just got harder for them. And this lady tells a story. She's like, Cynthia, I had to start my own little thing. I'm still looking for another job, but I had to start my own little online shop in order to survive. So that is the realities that we are faced with as women on the ground in the community.
Indeed, indeed. Let me bring in, Reverend Simi. Reverend Simi, in terms of just the role of the faith community, we know that the faith community has played a tremendous role, in terms of, resisting, apartheid, but not just that, but also engage in the reimagination of, a new South Africa. What's your sense about what the role, of the church, what was the role, after the, transition beyond, or I would say the reformation of apartheid, because, I don't think, that apartheid is gone. I mean, the way that, ideology and theology, has infected and affected us. Truth be told, many of us, continue to, deal with post-traumatic apartheid syndrome. And in many, many ways, that is, how it manifests itself structurally, if you will. But just your sense in terms of, the role the Methodist Church of Southern Africa has been an integral part, of that prophetic voice, and of course now we celebrate, the fact that, our dear sister and presiding bishop, is a woman, right? Bishop Purity Malinga. Your sense about just the role of the church right now, not just during the pandemic, but also as we deal with these structural challenges of poverty and inequality. And of course, yes, trying to respond to the looting that's going on in the streets, but also the looting via corruption that's going on in the suites, the governmental suites around that. Just a sense from you around the role of the church for such a time as this.
Thank you, Pastor Saul. Maybe I need to start by saying, it might offend some people, but I need to start by saying I don't think the church, I really feel the church has been deprived, or the voice of the church is no longer there, out there in the community. It can be there within the community that we serve around and with. However, when it comes to the bigger picture, when it comes to the government, I don't think we as a church are recognized as well as other political organizations that get consulted when there are big decisions need to take place. That's why I say, and I feel, that's my observation, I might be wrong, but I really feel that the church, the prophetic voice of the church is no longer there within the government. But coming back to what the church is doing, the church last year, during pandemic, or even before that, the church has always been there among the community members, doing what they can do, reaching out, assisting the needy, trying to alleviate poverty, and also looking after the people, the children that are orphans and vulnerable. We have been during the COVID time, we have been really hit hard by the number of people that have become suicidal because of one reason or another, mainly the loss of jobs, divorces that comes with it. And we are now, as a church, facing a huge demand of mobilizing counselors who can do professional counseling as well as Christian counseling, because there are those that are really believe that on attack, spiritual attacks. For such people, you really cannot approach them with a professional counseling. But we are mobilizing people, especially on all my counselors, it's females. Thank God for that. The team that we work with, we are having sleepless nights. We are doing counseling telephonically, face to face. And the church last year issued about 15 million. Yes, it sounds big, but it's actually a very small amount when we look at the Methodists of Southern Africa, how big it is, trying to reach out to the communities and families that have nothing, and by providing food for them. And lately, there's been funding that was distributed among all the circuits or all the synods to start the food, the gardening, to start gardening within the communities, within the church buildings, whoever that have a space where we can do food gardening, just to try and say, if people are losing jobs the way they're losing jobs, how can we self-sustain our community, ourselves as a community? Therefore, we started those projects. They are doing well. However, there's quite a need. We are getting a lot of communities that are saying we are having a place to plant, but we don't have resources. And the resources that we have, they are little. But the two major things, which is the depression that needs counseling, and also the reaching out of the community, as the church, we are there for people, and we are hoping to reach more people than what we are reaching at the moment. And the biggest challenge also that comes with everything else is the gender-based violence. We are seeing lots and lots of females that within the community of Mamelodi, within the community of Pretoria, within the community of Southern Africa, we see a lot of gender-based violence. And as a church, we're trying to intervene, and we're trying to partner up with the halfway safe houses that we just take the ladies that are abused where they are. There are shelters, actually. They go, and then while we're counseling, while trying to involve the police and everything, the court orders and everything, where we hide those ladies and as well as the children, because what we've seen that is starting to try to build up is to see the community that wants to take law into their hands. So to avoid that, we as a church, we're trying to act proactively than just moving those ladies and the children that are abused to shelters that we are trying to partner with. And there are some schools that are opening their school grounds. We are trying to get more tents where with those schools we can just put up erect tents and move some of the people there where they can get help. They get medical help, they get food, they get love and encouragement, and a lot of social workers that jump in and to partner up with that. That's as far as we are as a church.
Absolutely. I mean, the challenge with gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa, in Southern Africa, is a tremendous challenge. In fact, it's a moral crisis, for that matter. And we know that when we talk about, shutdowns and people having to stay indoors, for those affected by those and victimized by way of gender-based violence and the possibility, God forbid, of femicide, that is very, very challenging. around us. And so indeed, we are deeply concerned about that. Diane and I work, in that particular area through our work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And so let me bring Diana in, just in terms of as a person, working, in the municipality, in government right now. I mean, one can only imagine the challenges daily, weekly, that you and the leadership, in that metropolis has to face, with what's going on. This is, women's. We are anticipating. We are actually heading towards Women's Day, Women's Month, and as I was preparing for today's show, it was like is with what's going on, the deep sense of inequality that we are facing. Is this a commemoration? We talking about valuing and lifting up women, yet in so many ways what's going on exacerbates how it impacts women around that. So can you just give us a sense, Diana, as one of our women leaders, in you know that metropolis, at the Queenie of Durban, just your sense of how is all of this impacting and affecting, women, and how are they, breaking through on this, working through it, if at all. Diana?
Um, Kelvin and the ladies on board, and if there are any other gentlemen besides
Mm-hmm.
Kelvin, one of the biggest things is the GBV. And, COVID has not assisted, not at all. COVID, in fact, exacerbated the situation to a point where you have more women who have been abused and children who have been abused in the past 12 months of COVID.
Mm.
We're trying, we have different platforms, we have workshops, we have social workers, but the need is so great, it is very difficult. And one of the biggest things that is a big problem is that our police are really not capacitated to deal with gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm.
Woman goes to the police station, she has to sit for 6-7 hours before she's seen to. You get an insensitive police person who speaks to her. So what does the woman do? She walks away and she says, why should I bother?
Mm.
This is my life. Let me live this life. And, no matter how hard you try, no matter how many platforms or forums we can have,
Mm-hmm.
there is, in the schools, you see bullying in the schools, boys bullying girls. There's a case of a young girl who took her life because she was bullied, and that's a form of gender based violence. She committed suicide because she couldn't deal with it. She was ridiculed by her peers, and so she committed suicide.
Mm.
So, for us, we trying. We have platforms. We have uh, programs where we get them together for on the 21st of this month, 21st of July. We will have a huge gathering in a hotel of at least 100 ladies. The capacity is more than 500 people in that auditorium, so we're able to have 100 ladies where we again address GBV. Come and speak to us, give us your stories, and let us see where we go to from there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a young lady who went to the police station. She charged her, well, he's now her ex-husband. She charged her husband. He came and he bashed her, and she had to go to work in that condition because she has no other income, so she had to work. So we went to the police station. She sat for hours And eventually she walked away. And do you know this man is still walking on the street, not being arrested by the police?
Mm.
The, our law enforcement is not tuned to gender-based violence. They are not.
Mm-hmm.
At all, at all, at all. There needs to be, I'm not sure, we always put the pressure on the church-based organizations, and we say assist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go and look at our church organizations need to be doing what we would call education to the police who have to deal with the people coming to the police station. And I think our social workers also need to be sensitized. I think our social workers they are too few, they're underworked, and they can't deal with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Many
True.
lawyers, yeah, many lawyers have walked away from their profession when they say, we listen to these horrific stories. How do we continue on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm.
Government, there needs to be a different methodology dealing with gender-based violence. We should be educating the people who are there to assist the woman. Because many women end up withdrawing the charges and the man continues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, indeed. It's just very, very heartbreaking. And you're right. So much is expected of all faith communities to stand in the gap. Yet, some of these challenges, the faith community faces around that. I want to acknowledge all those who are joining us via Facebook. Thank you for your comments and words of affirmation. We have folks joining us from the U.S. and from South Africa. And so it's just so glad that you're joining us. So we want you to know that we see you. We see you, TJ Day. We see you, Martha Taylor LaCroix. We see you, Reverend Michelle Hansrott and Reverend Superior Mahdi. We see you. Thank you for joining, and we appreciate your comments. As you join in today. I want to bring in Busi. Busi, clearly, the challenges are so multifaceted, and sometimes, one can ask, well, where do you start, in terms of doing something, or what can you do around that? And so I'm just, wondering in your analysis, and the work that you've been doing, as we, look for ways, to just, unpack, root causes, if you will, and looking, for, how to really get at these root causes and not just deal with the symptoms, of what's going on. Can you share some perspective, around just, where we are, what are some of these, different facets of what we are dealing with and talking about, as we, navigate our way through, this difficult time right now.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think part of this current moment is just reminding us of the incomplete work as a country of healing some of the wounds of the past. And at the same time, the kind of missed opportunities we've had in terms of creating a new reality for all of us, right? So when I think of the current situation around COVID, so even though that's sort of the reality for kind of globally, but how it's impacting us actually is landing squarely around all the issues that we've just been deferring as a country. So if you think of things around health inequity and how that's playing out, around food injustice and how that's playing out, right? So just all these systems and how they interact. So there's a part for me that feels like hopefully it's a reminder of the urgency of the work that we're all needing to do. And part of that is then being able to say, what are the different spaces that we're able to engage around? I think if we think of civil society or sort of social actors, there's been a lot of momentum that's been gained around this time. When you think of people that have been organizing around sort of the basic income grant, that's been amazing work. But at the same time, there is a question for me around why did we wait for a crisis, right? And some of those actors actually have been doing that work for a while. But the fact that we wait for a crisis for these things to actually sort of either galvanize us is something for me that I am wondering, what would it take for us to be proactive around finding solutions, around engaging, around building networks, around building bridges for all of us to be able to find solutions and to be able to align around the future that we're wanting to create together. So yeah, I think it's different stakeholders that are needing to do work differently. I know for myself in the spaces I'm in, I also find it frustrating that there's still a sense of almost surprise or a sense that people feel like when there is a crisis, it's unforeseen, right? So this kind of not always being aware of, as a society, we've been on a knife's edge for a while. So when something like COVID happens, the most recent kind of social unrest happens, that's not surprising, right? So a lot of those fault lines are already existing. What's the ability to be able to think through what are solutions that are required collectively? So there is a part for me around what are the conversations that I needed in order for all of us to have a sense of a shared future that we're wanting to build, what the different contributions are, right? So because I think that there are things happening. How can those be amplified, and how can those in some ways coalesce towards the same direction that we're all wanting to work towards? And yeah, so I think I speak a little bit around sort of a social engagement space, right? So in terms of social movements, in terms of social stakeholders, but simultaneously, what's the responsibility of other players or other stakeholders in business, in government? And some of those spaces are also contributing to the problems that we see. When we talk about inequity, I think we can also think a little bit around how is that playing out in kind of the business space in South Africa, and the kind of orientation we have towards sort of how we see a society being built and what's all our contribution towards that. And then, how do we hold government accountable? I think that there's a whole other piece that's required. As South Africans, I feel like we can sort of view things as almost external to ourselves rather than actually this is part of our own doing. And how did we get here? So I think there's an opportunity that's being presented by the current situation, as hard as it is. And for me, there is a question around what's the role of women. I think when you were opening up this question around a lot of the crisis that we find ourselves in, I think it's because women are also not centered in the solutions that we have. So what's the role of women being part of shaping that and driving some of those solutions? And I've been hearing a few of the speakers talk about this idea around one of the biggest impact that we're not talking about is around the psychological impact of the past year, right? So at an emotional level, the kind of loss and pain that people have been going through. I know in some spaces, the kind of healing work that's being led by women is what's been holding communities together, right? So how can we do more of that? How can we amplify that? How can we support those initiatives? Because hopefully that's also some of the seeds of the solutions that are required. If people are supported hopefully then they're also resourced in terms of being part of generating solutions and coming up with solutions. So it's a challenging time, but I think hopefully it's also a moment where for those that it's always been kind of from a distance seems like it's somebody else's problem. It's everyone's problem. And unless everyone is well, none of us are well, essentially. I think that's the opportunity that this crisis is presenting to all of us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. You mentioned the incomplete work that that we have yet to do. And we know that we've celebrated at 94 the negotiated revolution, if you will, that we entered in as a result of what happened at Codesa, and looking now at some of the cracks, in that, there were warnings around that, from Winnie Mandela and others. A couple of weeks ago, I had Mzwakhe Mbuli on, the People's Poet, and he, talked around that, in terms of, missed opportunities. But here we are, and I want to pick up on, one, incomplete work, and two, how do we center women, right, in responding, framing, approaching, and engaging the incomplete work. And so I'm going to ask, Cynthia to share some thoughts, around that. You in the work that you've been doing, both, as a woman of faith, as a businesswoman, as one engaged in community and youth development, can you name some of the incomplete work, and we'll ask, everyone to do that. Just name some of the incomplete work, and then, how do we center women in terms of helping us to frame, strategies, that will move us, to who we can and need to become in South Africa. So, Cynthia, do you want to kick us off around just incomplete work, and how do we center women, in responding to that? Okay, I don't know whether Cynthia is there. Maybe we may have lost her. So let me go to Reverend, Reverend Simi. Your sense, Reverend Simi, in terms of just, what's the incomplete work, and how do we, center women in responding to it, or providing a framework for it, strategies for it, as we continue to journey towards beloved community in South Africa. Reverend Simi?
Maybe I would like to say, when Pastor Saul, you started on your opening, you said we are in this mess because of men. Maybe to go with that, I would say maybe we need, the country, the community needs to start taking women seriously. And if I talk about taking them seriously, one, if they feel women need to take positions of some sort, one, they need to take people who qualify to do that. And two, they need to be respected on the roles that they are given in that situation or in that platform. Because what I've noticed at the moment, the men or the people who appoint ladies, they will appoint them just to balance the 40-40-20 and setting us up for failure. And then at the end, you find that there is sort of judging of, they want positions, but they cannot perform. And they don't have someone to mentor them, as the men have been in roles or in those positions for quite a long time. I believe that you cannot become experienced without getting someone leading you or direct you to the direction where you need to go to before you use your talent and the gifting that you have. So the incomplete work, it can be the equipping and appointing the right people for the right position, not just window dress to fulfill the 40-40-20. And also, obviously, how to get there is to make sure that we respect people's ideas. We are unique, we are different, and we work together as organizations, because different organizations work in corners, and that is why it looks as if we are unable to reach out to more people. Because if it's this community, we are all in Pretoria, but we are doing similar things in different places. Sometimes there's a duplication whereby one community gets more attention than other communities. But if we can work as a team, different organizations work together as a team with the government departments, I believe that those incomplete works, they can be covered if we can have that approach. But it definitely cannot be an overnight thing. It's going to be a process. But if we can just take away the power hunger, because that's the reason why there's so many organizations that work on in silence. If we can just remove that power hunger and work in as a team, different organization, religious organization, NGOs, government, and business people, if we can team up, we can be able to complete the work that is currently incomplete.
That's well stated. Yeah, it's clear that we have to connect the dots, between different organizations, different sectors, just to try and see how we can actually talk with one another and listen to one another. I don't know whether Cynthia is able to respond, right now. Cynthia, are you able to respond to that question?
Yes, I am. Sorry
Mm-hmm.
about that. Lost connection for a bit there.
Yes.
Um, I agree with what the Reverend just said now. And to add on to that is, for those who are in corporates, to stand up. We see not to stand up, but to speak up. We see a lot happening on the political front where people are speaking up and they're speaking out. But those who are sitting in their cushy jobs, um, they who sit in their cushy jobs in corporate need to start speaking up. Just an incident a few weeks back where I had to stand up for, firstly, as being a woman, and secondly, for being a black woman in the company that I find myself in, where I found that if I do not speak up now, then I'm doing an injustice for those to follow. And when we started the program, we joked around the fact that I'm always the youngest in a lot of the circles that I find myself in, which is an honor, which is a privilege, and I'm learning a lot from the older folk. But the reality that I've also brought through is that with COVID, we are losing a lot of our old people. We are losing a lot of our mentors, those who have spoken into our lives, and they are falling away. They have spoken up. They've been heard, but it is up to us now to speak up for the incomplete work to be done. For women, one of the things that needs to be done is for women to be fully recognized for who we are, for the giftings that we carry. And because we have giftings and it is being shoved to the side when we do speak up, it makes it difficult for the things on the ground to happen the way it should happen. Because we have to face reality as women, we are still finding ourselves at a place where men are still, they are still taking the lead because they feel that they are the man, and we respect them for that. We salute them for that. But I believe that in order for the work to be done, in order for gender-based violence to be addressed, in order for our communities to become better, our kids to be looked after better, we need to start speaking up. We need to stop the silence. We need to also draw together, pull together like never before, because what I've also realized, we are not in a competition. We are not, our kids are falling away, our communities are falling apart, our government are doing what they are doing, and what we are burning for in the communities, because we are not speaking up. And especially those who find themselves in corporate, they need to start speaking up, because our realities are also the fact that our corporates are still run by white men, and by white old men. That is the reality that we find ourselves in. But we need to speak up. I know you said I must just mention one, but we need to speak up. We cannot be silent anymore. Being silent just because we have the salary that comes in is an injustice for our kids. We've seen it. We've seen it happening. That decades later, we are still struggling. And yes, they say we are a young democracy, but we were supposed to be so much further if only we spoke up. So that is
Yeah.
my piece on the
Thanks.
incomplete work that needs to be done.
Thanks, well said. I mean, one thing that you mentioned that we have to just be clear about is, around the incomplete work as it relates to the economic restructuring that has to take place in South Africa. One cannot, fund, if you will, or support economically one of the world's most progressive constitutions with one of the world's most regressive economic strategies, which is trickle down, economics. That's not that hasn't worked anywhere. It hasn't worked in the United States. It hasn't worked in Europe, and it definitely hasn't worked in South Africa. And so this whole economic piece has to be looked at. I mean, and yeah, we have to name it. The whole piece around how do we really deal with, the white capital monopoly, that still has a stringhold, a chokehold, right, on the economy, of South Africa. That has to be dealt with. That has to be dealt with because you see, apartheid was not just a racial ideology and theology; it was also an economic ideology and theology. And so we have to connect, the incomplete work even around that particular piece, around it, and how do we look at that. Let me ask Diana, your sense, Diana, of the incomplete work, and how do we center, the voice and vision, of women, in that work as we, as we continue, to ignite the embers of Ubuntu.
Calvin, let me start off by saying the two previous speakers, I agree 100% with what you're saying. But for me, the most incomplete work is the fact that as women, we do not support women. I have sat in corporate meetings where women vote men into positions as opposed to an equally highly educated woman who is also standing up for the position. That's the first thing which I find very incomplete. Second of all of that, our women need to feel and know their worth. Too often as women, we say, no, I can't do it. No, give it to somebody else. take up the cudgels and do what you have to do. That is where I find we are falling down as women. Somebody alluded to the many different organizations. Nobody wants to coordinate or to amalgamate and say, together we are stronger and we will do more and provide more. We all want to do a little bit in our own little space and stand up and put on Facebook or put on Instagram. I fed 50 people today. I gave 10 households groceries. Whereas if we had joined together, we could have seen 50 people or 100 people opposed to the numbers that we do independently. So that is another incomplete task. We need to unite. Feeding schemes need to unite. GBV organizations need to come together. There needs to be an umbrella body. Yes, keep your autonomy, no problem. But come together under an umbrella body so that we are all not doing the same thing and reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. I agree that when you look at the male sector, we are dominated by the male sector. But let's be fair and let's be honest. We allow the men to tramp over our feet. We need to stand as a woman and stand steadfast as women that this is where we're going and that end of the road is our achievement. Support Mrs. Mhlongo in her quest to reach that goal. Support Mrs. Hadebe in her quest to get to that. I may not be as intelligent as her, but I need to give that woman that support because too often women are put down. And if we don't, as women, support one another, how do we expect the men to support us? You know, I've been in boardrooms where the men say, they won't vote. They'll vote us in. They'll vote us in. That's how they talk. That is how the men talk because they know exactly how we think. We need to change our thought process to become very much focused on what it is and how is it that we put women in. It's not even about political positions. It's not even about corporate positions. But give a woman who knows how to sew, give her that right to be able to provide and to get to a point where one day you see her fashion being displayed on the fashion pages in some magazine. Support those women first before we climb the highest ladder. If we climb from the lowest rung and get to the top, then we will have achieved the incomplete work. Thank you.
Great, that was well said. I want to bring in Busi before we start our final round. Around this whole piece about incomplete work, I mentioned in my description, of this series, that we want to explore immediate and long-term systemic solutions to recover, reset, and rebuild a more just, right, equal, inclusive, and equitable South Africa. In that, I hope that I'm kind of hinting to some of that incomplete work, that needs to be done, on an institutional level. And I just appreciate how, Diana and Reverend Simi, and Cynthia also, brought in, just the personal aspects, around that, and this whole notion, of women knowing their worth. We would want to affirm that and celebrate that, and uplift that, in a very, very intentional way, as we. But we also know that, we cannot take lighter internalization, of institutional right? Understandings or institutional cultures. You see that we are responding to, internally, mentally, emotionally, as we try to deal with, all of this. So Busi, your thoughts, are just around the incomplete work, and how do we, in real, relevant and effective ways, center the visions and the voices of women.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's sometimes useful to think of what are some of the kind of bite-sized pieces to some of that incomplete work, right? Mm-hmm. So if I think of issues around food injustice in South Africa, something that I think is pervasive and central to so many kind of injustices we see in the country. There's so much work that women are doing in that space, but the way it's still framed almost as charity, right? Almost as a nice to have rather than one of the many things that are stitching this country together, holding the pieces together. So there's part of it is acknowledging the work of women where there is that work happening, centering that work, also framing it in ways that speak to the power of the work of women rather than sort of the additional, the kind of patchwork that women are doing, right? I feel like the work of women is often seen as charity rather than transformative work. So again, if I think of work that's being done in sort of the food justice space by women, I think that is transformative work, right? So, and what would that look like at a greater scale, being more amplified and resourced and given the acknowledgement that it deserves, right? So, and I think more of that is required. So that would be just one example. People have been talking about the idea of an economic CODESA in South Africa. So the incomplete work of when you talk about, so we've done the transforming power in terms of a political lens, and even that's been problematic, right? But what has been done in terms of a social and economic lens, not enough of that has been happening. So the example I was giving earlier around the work around the basic income grant, it would be one slice or example around that. But what would it take to transform an economy that really centers the human being, essentially? And I do think women's voices would be important in that. When you think of communities and the kind of circular economy that I think a lot of communities are held together by women as own kind of contribution, how women do business in particular would be one example. So how do we learn from that and ensure that then that's part of how we design our solutions? So there is a part for me around that. There's an opportunity here in terms of the incomplete work actually does mean that how do we do that differently, right? So when I listen to people and this idea of the economic CODESA, I think there's something there in terms of how do we enter conversations around what's needed to be able to transform our economy that will center the human. And I do think women hopefully are part of then shaping that. So that would be something that I would think is something practical that we can look at. But there are already existing examples of what's happening. And like I'm saying, in the food justice space, I think that's just one example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great piece. And my organization, that I co-founded, in South Africa as part of my, Atlantic work, that is, called, Beloved Community Coalition. We work in that area of food equity, and we have now connected with, Dora and her team, and we work with 27 other grassroots organizations around the country, dealing with, access to food equity from that line to the gender-based violence and femicide piece, and we'll share a little bit about what's coming up around that, but you and I know that the work that women do, is not just charity. It may start off as that, but in the end, it really invites us into some deep work, some deep transformational pieces, around that. And so, as we make our way to a conclusion here, let me uh, you know, uh, uh, um, you know, say I said earlier on, it's about the questions that you are asking. So, uh, um, what questions, do you all think we should be asking right now, of the government, of corporate South Africa, or philanthropic South Africa, right? A sector that still needs to be developed, as a way of holding, corporates accountable, or providing them with a path, to be able to support, intentionally and authentically grassroots initiatives, around that. What are some of the questions that we ought to be asking for such a time, as this? I know everybody looking for answers, but what are the hard, deep, and also heart, AERT questions, that we need to be asking for such a time as this. I'm gonna go the other way around now, and maybe, just start with Busi. Busi, I'm so glad you mentioned that economic Odessa, because that's long overdue. Because that was we lost that, we surrendered that at the negotiations table. And Mama Winnie talked about that. But what questions do you think we ought to be asking right now as we navigate pandemic, economic, social, and political challenges?
Yeah, the questions I hold around how do we heal, right? So all of us, how do we heal together? I'm not sure, perhaps it was you, Calvin, who said, was talking about PTSD, right? So when I think of a South African context, it's not just post-traumatic stress disorder, right? It's current. So how do we heal from the past? How do we heal from the present? What's the work of healing that's required? So that's one question I hold. And then the big question for me is around how do we dream differently, right? So how do we dream a new future? There's a sense that we can be reactionary in South Africa. So the constant kind of responding to crisis after crisis. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't a need for the immediate, but what's lost in terms of really thinking through what's the future we're trying to build together. I know some people talk about this kind of progressive constitution we have. I'm not sure if we've all internalized that, right? So if that's one piece of the puzzle, then let's go deeper in terms of what that means. But what's the kind of dream that we have for ourselves? That hopefully, if we were clearer about that, that might be the driving force in terms of being able to untangle ourselves from so many of the things that we stuck around. And the impetus to be able to say, how are we constantly challenging what we see? We can be complacent around some of the things that happen around us, that are part of contributing to the problems that we see. So that those would be the two for me, right? So how do we heal and how do we dream together? How do we heal together and how do we dream together?
I liked it. How do we heal together and how do we dream together? All right. Let's go to Cynthia. How about your thoughts, on what are some of the critical questions that we need to be asking right now, in these turbulent and tumultuous times?
I think the first question that I am asking is, so what? So what? We are reshuffling the cabinet. So what? Does it really make an impact on the ground? Are we going to continue looking Are we going to continue looking at the government to come and do something for us, or are we going to stand up and make a difference? And because the difference should not just be the big things that we want to do, but the little things that we do on the ground. So, are we going to continue looking at the government? The government has failed us so many times, and we at that's on the ground doing the work that's with the community on a daily basis, we see how they suffer. So are we going to continue looking at the government and waiting for them to rescue us because they are failing us? And then I think one of the questions is just the question that Busi brought up now. How do we heal together? Because not just as a community, not just as a country, but as a world, we are all in pain. We are all suffering under a pandemic, and we really need to reinvent ourselves. We have been doing it. So how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we reimagine? How do we relook the things that's happening around us? Are we going to just look at COVID and say, oh, we'll get through this and we'll see how we'll get through it? Or does it present an opportunity for us to reinvent who we are, to reinvent what's happening on the ground as well, on a political and economic, on political, economical, and on community level? So for me, I've got a lot of questions that needs answers, that need answered.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. Let me ask Diana to, as you, deal with what's happening, in KwaZulu-Natal province in general, at eThekwini, municipal area, Durban, what's going on, um, in some of the communities, the racial tensions that are happening there. What are some of the questions, Diana, that you have, as one of our public servants?
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
How do we reignite, or how do we put back family value?
Mm-hmm.
If there is family value and there's family unity and there's community unity, it goes broader than the community. It then becomes provincial unity, it becomes national unity,
Mm-hmm.
and we can then take it to the world. It becomes world unity. So I think for me, in as much as I agree, where to from here, how do we do this? The one thing that we need to be doing is we need to be going back to instill family values. We have lost it along the way. I understand um, everyone saying corporate, the government. I would not argue with anyone over that. But I'm also saying if each family, the feeling or the understanding of what we understand, which is Ubuntu, Ubuntu means so much in a community.
Mm-hmm.
They, each neighbor, it's no neighbor should say it's not my business because my neighbor is getting a hiding from her husband. No neighbor should say that child that's laying on the road there drugged up is not my business. We need to instill that family value more than anything else to be able for us as a country to escape where we are right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great, great. Thank you for that. Family, family, family. That's the essence of Ubuntu, right? Let me invite Reverend Simi to share, what are the questions that you have, and then We have an internet question that I want to lift up, and I'm going to ask you guys to do it quickly because we are running out of time. But I cannot let this question go by. So, Reverend Simi, you can share the questions that you have, but also your colleague and our friend, Reverend Marty, put in the Facebook chat the question of how can we as men come alongside women in our communities in empowering rather than overpowering ways. So I'm going to ask each one of you to, that'll be your final comments, around that. But I think that's a great question to conclude on in terms of, how do we as men come alongside you. But your question, Reverend Marty, Reverend Simi, and then you can quickly share how we as men can come alongside you.
I 150%, if there's anything like that, agree with the mayor-elect Diana, that if we can reignite, even if we haven't done before, if we can ignite the embers of Ubuntu, that's where everything starts. Because if we understand that my pain is your pain and the other person's pain is my pain, her poverty, her going to bed with her children without something to eat, it's my responsibility to make sure that I share what I have with that person. I think that can be one thing that we can start with. And then we address the question of what needs to change. What is it that definitely needs to change? I as much as I agree with other speakers as well, I would like to add that I would love to see a country whereby, which is South Africa, whereby business people can adopt small companies, small businesses. The lady in the street, the lady who's having a food garden, whereby the company will say, from what you are planting, I want to journey with you because I want to take your vegetation and take it to the market, to the people out there. Because the 10 rand that you're making from one bag, sometimes nobody's buying. That means that day your children won't have a loaf of bread. Meanwhile, if you give me half of what you are planting and then I give you money in that regard, then I will be meeting you halfway. So I will love to see the businesses mentoring small businesses. I felt a pain when big businesses started to claim from their insurances during the looting, and the small businesses, the people on the corner of the street had nothing to claim from. I was hurt because those people, they took the last cent that they had to buy whatever that they had, hoping that they to generate the profits to feed their families. So that means they want at the meantime, they still won't be able to pay for the insurance. They won't be able to pay for VAT. Those things, they need extra money. But if they can have somebody who will mentor them and to be able to reach that level where they can afford basic things that covers their business in crisis should they come up. That's where I would end.
All right, now quickly. How can men come alongside you and facilitate support and solidarity and unity? That's the question. So take about 30 seconds, and just share with us how that can happen. Let's start with Diana, Cynthia, and then Busi. You'll close us out. So Diana, how can we as men come alongside you, Madam Deputy Mayor, as you lead and serve, during this time?
Okay, 30 seconds. Men need to be part of every decision that women make.
Okay.
You cannot have a meeting and make a decision and the male is not part of that decision.
All right.
That is where the resistance comes from. They need to be part of the broad decisions made in the forums and wherever we are.
Okay. I'll add what my mom would say. Remember, men, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means you have to listen more and talk less while you're in that meeting. All right. That's what my mom would add to that. I think she just channeled herself through me right there. Cynthia, how can men come alongside and support, you as you doing what you're doing in the community, in corporate, etc.?
Just to be honest, I'm still doing what I am doing, whether men supports me or not. But I want to speak on what made me be the confident person that I am. And I would want to encourage men to do this. I grew up with men around me, uncles and cousins, which were male. And because they did not make me feel less than because I'm a woman, I am the confident woman that I am. So if men wants to help women, I would say go and encourage that young lady that is wanting to do something. Go and encourage that young girl who has no one to encourage her, to say, my girl, you can do it, who does not have a man to speak in her life. So I think that is what men can do for women, in answering that question.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Well said. Busi?
Yeah, so for me, I think just an awareness of how structures perpetuate inequality between women and men, right? So I think if men just were aware of that, and then we're part of dismantling some of those structures. So I think an acknowledgement goes a long way. I think a lot of times for women, just even having the sense that someone is aware of the impact of some of those structures and the inequity might go a long way. And then being part of the solution in dismantling some of those structures.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Busi, Diana, Cynthia, Reverend Simi. You have allowed me to start my Sunday off in a blessed way. And I hope that those who've joined us and those who will be watching this, they will be, just encouraged and uplifted, to know that no matter how dark the days are, we can face the rising sun in unity and solidarity with one another. That's what Ubuntu is all about. I'm going to display on the screen an image that you all are very much aware of, that came out of the 1956 Women's March, in South Africa, when women refused, to give into increasing oppression without some form of protest. These famous words that became part of a song, have come to symbolize the courage, the resilience, and the boldness of our women, in South Africa. And they simply said, now you have touched the women, you have struck a rock, you have dislodged a boulder, you will be crushed. And that's in the end what it's all about. To see, there we go, in terms of just continuing to walk together and work together, knowing, what Ubuntu ignites in all of us, during this particular time. So thank you so much. And as always, we want to invite you to participate, do something around it. And so we're going to display a flyer quickly of an event that's coming up. Ricky Samuels, my brother from Oakland, who's from South Africa, put that in the chat, Simi, when you talked about gender-based violence and femicide. Beloved Community Coalition, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and ACT Africa, we are coming together, to continue to challenge, this whole moral crisis of gender-based violence and femicide. And we are calling all men to join us for ACT Africa International Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Men's Conference. You can register now, virtual attendance, is encouraged. We may or may not have, a hybrid, kind of experience for folk, given, what what COVID-19 will do in South Africa. But this is coming up. It's scheduled for September the 18th. That's next month, and so we are looking forward, to this, and we'll share more about it, as we move forward. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been Faith Without Borders. Always a joy and a privilege to be your host. I am Pastor Calvin Sauls, coming to you straight out of South Los Angeles, and glad to live at the intersection of South Los Angeles and South Africa as we seek to unite, as we seek to come together, and as we seek to move together in resistance and reimagination to see how it is that we can reach beloved community. Take care, be safe, and stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.